Chapter 33, Chapter 30, The City of Steel. Chapter 30, The City of Steel. Oria was an eastern kingdom, along the equator, and thus fairly warm even during the onset of winter. The only part of the land touched by snow was the mountaintops in the far south, and even that only lightly. Most of the nation was pleasant fields and forests, bordered by the sea to both east and west, the latter with the Bay of Gold that separated north and south on that side. The unfortunately named capital city of Hometown was located on the north, near the coast, while the south had been uninhabited for centuries, due to the presence of Mount Fubi between it and the rest of the country. Now a small but growing town, perhaps even a city, was expanding day by day and house by house, as the old ruins that had once sat there were refurbished and rebuilt by 3 builders from Capitan in the north. Funded by the profits of the city's founders and the benevolence of an Orian duke who they had done several jobs for, it boasted a good 20 houses, most of which were occupied by old friends, acquaintances with connections, or simply people with useful talents who had been looking to relocate. Even to the stranger's eye, it would be obvious which building the people in charge lived in. Most of them were common, if comfortable-looking, houses, but the first one to be built was a clear exception. A 4-story stone tower, it loomed over the rest of the town from the northeast on a rise of land with a refurbished and polished statue of Loden, the dragon god, off to the left. It was the home and headquarters of the city's founders, the band of mercenaries known as the Dragon Kin, and it was where they returned to when a job was done and it was time to prepare for the next one. At the moment they had retired to the meeting room in the center of the building on the first floor, behind the lobby, to explain the events of recent days to Nero Mani, their 10th member. A bald, stooped man of extremely advanced years with poor hygiene and a beard that nearly stretched to his feet, his mind was nevertheless still sharp, and his ability to defend himself with sword or cane competent. Cheerful and eccentric, he served as the team's agent and clerk, as well as keeping order in the city, which was a constant effort on most days.
Loden filled me in on what happened in Windia,
Nero said quietly once they were done recapping, unusually somber. He referred to the spirit of the dragon god, who spoke to the group through the statues of him that still dotted the world, despite his lack of worship in the modern age.
Didn't say anything about Evray, though.
He glanced towards Nina, started to say something, then paused as he saw the cold, quiet look on her face before shaking his head and turning back to Ryu.
Not quite what we hoped for, but at least you got out of there. That's what's important, when you get right down to it.
Ryu slowly nodded.
Survival. Now that we're out, though, time to plan our next move. We're heading to the Isle of Guns, right?
Bao said, raising an eyebrow.
To see if we can find Claris group and join forces with them. And Patty, I guess.
He rolled his eyes.
I can't believe we're actually planning on finding her for another team-up. A long-term one this time. That alone is evidence of how serious this is. She's not so bad,
Rand grunted.
I mean, yeah, she gives me as much of a headache as the rest of you, but she's got it where it counts. I guess, yeah.
Cat sighed.
She's a good kid. She's just such a pain in the ass, you know? And this is coming from me. We can deal.
Sten shrugged.
We've all done worse. With luck, Tika and his boys will be able to keep her under control. I know if I'd had to deal with her for as long as it sounds like they have, I'd have figured something out. Maybe since she's the one paying the bills, she won't be coming along on most of the jobs,
Ryu guessed.
Those ones we've seen her meeting Tika on could be flukes. Yeah, and maybe it's gonna rain any tomorrow, too,
Dee said dryly.
You know our luck better than that. A guy can hope, right?
He shot back.
Optimism is key. Anyways, we'll head over there first thing tomorrow morning and start asking around. No real point in forming a plan beyond that just yet until we meet up with them and see what they're up to. That it for tonight, then?
Sten asked, reaching behind him and stretching.
I'd kind of like to go next door and see what Santa's up to. And I, with Mademoiselle Ciso,
Jean agreed.
If you do, please try to avoid Spoo,
Nina asked, blushing slightly.
She might ask about me. Same here, with Solo.
Rand nodded. Sana, Ciso, Spoo, and Solo were all sisters, the last descendants of the near-extinct fusion clan, along with their grandmother and 2 cousins who hadn't been located yet. Entirely human in appearance, though with a wide variety of skin tones and normally implausible hair colors, they held the ability to fuse with other people, becoming a sort of mental passenger in exchange for enhancing their partner's natural abilities. According to them, Sana augmented physical strength and Ciso magical talent. Neither of the other 2 had been around long enough for anybody to ask. Ryu's clan was one of the few incapable of doing so. Fortunately, the entire thing kind of creeped him out. Most of the others had gotten used to it over time, even though Sten and Jean were the only ones who had actually done it on a regular basis. Spar had tried once with Sana, but it hadn't gone well. The same girl had tried it with Ryu anyways when they had first met, and the explosive reaction had destroyed her and her grandmother's house, as well as awakening the breath of fire within him. Each had some sort of elemental affinity to fire, water, air or earth as well, though this seemed to have no relevance Ryu knew of aside from their preference in partners. 3 were beautiful, flirtatious girls who had zeroed in on 1 or 2 of them as their tastes had inclined, their attitudes towards it indicating that they found the process a little too enjoyable. It was a stroke of luck that the first 2 to move in had been attracted to the team's biggest womanizers. Solo was just as attracted to Rand, but looked to be over 500 pounds, which was why the big farmlander wished to avoid a reunion. Nina's dislike for Siso, on the other hand, came from her obvious gender preferences and aggressive tendencies, which she did not return.
Now hold on there,
Nero said, standing up with the help of his cane.
Before we break this up, there is one more thing that we all need to talk about. Something's come up, while you were all gone, and I don't just mean the usual clown acts half the people in this damn town get up to. You remember how the boys were going to try and get that old well working again? The one over next to where Giggly and her girls live. Yeah, they were saying something about that a while back,
Ryu recalled, frowning. The boys were the 3 carpenters who had been the first citizens of the town aside from them, along with their families. Rivob, Haseko, and Izan had come to finish up the job on their headquarters and the Fusion clan families, and through a series of shenanigans that had never adequately been explained to him, had ended up rebuilding more than a dozen more as well, 3 of which they had moved into.
That was all the way back before we even went to Tunlin, though. It took them a while to get the damn thing unclogged, and when they did...
Nero shook his head, starting for the door.
Well, you had better see for yourself. This should be interesting,
Spar murmured tonelessly as they exchanged glances and shrugs before following the old man back out. Descending the front steps and passing by the girl's house next door, they continued to what had been a massive heap of underbrush most times Ryu had looked at it. Now it was cleared, and a round stone well stood exposed. From the looks of it, it could have been put in just last week, aside from the fact that it was dry, dark, and empty.
Looks like they got it cleared out,
Bao said, looking down into it.
So is it just dried up? I wish that was all to it,
Nero growled, looking irritated now that they were actually there.
Like I said, come on and see for yourselves.
Swinging himself over the side, he began climbing down the steel rungs set into the well.
Does anybody else have a bad feeling about this?
Sten commented as Ryu and the others followed him down.
That would be an understatement,
Nina agreed.
I'll be okay as long as nothing tries to kill us,
Ryu called back up as he reached the bottom of the well, where Nero had already lit a torch. Turning around and stepping out of the way, he glanced forward and froze, drawing in a deep breath.
Then again, maybe not.
He had expected a large, hollowed-out area, but he hadn't thought that it would be tiled in black, or that the walls and ceiling would all be as well. Had he noticed that as soon as he had landed, it might have prepared him for what he now saw in the back of the room. A massive metal device, large and round, open at the front with a chair to sit in, and a surface that could close to ensure that whoever did so stayed there. Metal pipes ran into a maddening mess behind it, thousands of them, the only other part of note a glowing panel with controls set into it. It was lost technology, from thousands of years ago, that mankind had forgotten how to create, let alone use. A kind that they had seen before.
Holy shit,
Bao whispered, staring in awe.
It's one of those things from High Fort. The kind Shapukai was using on the princess. What the hell is one of those doing under our town?
Kat demanded angrily, but it wasn't as loud as she would normally be.
You see the problem,
Nero grunted.
When the boys found this thing down here, they came and told me, right away. Knew it was more our business than theirs. I took one look at it and figured it was probably the same thing you told me about from that nasty bit o' business. You thought right.
Sten scratched his chin, scowling, all traces of mirth gone in an instant.
These things are bad business. As far as we know, nobody else had any of them but Highland, and even we couldn't work them until Shapukai wormed her way in. How the hell did one of these get into a dump like this? The same way the ones in High Fort did,
Dee said flatly, staring at the device with undisguised loathing.
When the goddess Miria was finally killed 1,000 years ago, her flying fortress, Obelisk, detonated in lower planetary orbit with enough force to send chunks of it flying all across the globe. Most of them didn't survive the landing, but 2 of the largest pieces were used as the foundations for Sima Fort and High Fort. Looks like a third one plowed itself into the ground here. Clearly, exactly what our day needed,
Nina murmured.
At least the demons don't seem to know about this one.
She paused, a horrified look coming over her face.
Unless... No, we're good,
Ryu told her.
I like these guys, but I'm not stupid. Tested 'em all with the dragon's tear. No demons here. Excellent.
Spar nodded slightly.
So then, the question remains. What course of action should we take, in regards to this? Don't suppose there's any chance we can just board the well up and forget about it?
Bao suggested, but Ryu could tell he was joking.
Not happening.
He shook his head.
This sucks, but now that we know about it, we can't just pretend we don't. We need to do something about this.
He thought for a moment.
First thing is figuring out just how far this goes. Is it just here, under this well, or does this extend all the way under the entire Dem town? Mon Dieu,
Jean murmured, eyes wide.
I had not considered that, but... In Sima, though only one room contained access, it could control the entire fortress. Though this seems to be only a slight amount, who can know how much is truly there, and how far it is spread?
Exactly, Nina agreed.
It might not be important, but then again, it might. We need to know. Problem is, that's easier said than done, fellas,
Nero pointed out.
Don't think anybody's gonna be too happy if we start digging up the streets, and burrowing out from here under those houses is about as bad an idea as it gets. Which leads me to my second point.
Ryu scowled at the control panel.
I'm sick of running into these things and not being able to do anything more than break them. We need to figure out how they work, and lucky us, we've got an example right here just for our benefit.
He glanced at Deez.
I don't suppose you... Nope,
she cut him off.
Sorry, I always preferred magic. My...
She paused for a moment before continuing.
Miria was a technology junkie, but not me, even back in those days. And before you ask, Lauden's even worse than me, so don't get any ideas about hauling that statue down here to take a look. Speaking as the guy most likely to have been handed that particular job if it had happened, thanks,
Rand muttered.
I wasn't going to suggest that,
Ryu protested, then paused.
Well, probably. Anyways, if we don't have anybody who knows their way around this stuff, then we'll just have to find somebody who does, or can at least learn. Bringing in an expert.
Sten guessed.
From guns, I take it. Bingo.
Ryu nodded.
We're going there anyways, so we might as well try and find somebody with an interest in lost technology while we're there. Guns is the most advanced nation in the world, so they're our best bet. A specialist like that won't be cheap, though,
Deez pointed out.
Especially if we want them to come all the way out here. Well, unless we can find a real fanatic, I've known some techies who would agree to do the job just for the chance to poke around with this stuff. But what are the odds of us getting that lucky? Whenever you intentionally attempt to invoke fate like that, my petals itch,
Spar told her solemnly.
Please don't. We done here?
Kat asked after a long moment.
Yeah, for now,
Ryu said, and they all began climbing back up.
Something else to take care of tomorrow. Like we needed any more headaches. You and Deez are really on a roll tonight, aren't you?
She asked him dryly.
All right, folks, you heard him. Now taking bets on what else is going to happen tonight. Do you mind?
Ryu asked her, prompting a smirk.
Please. If I didn't give you grief, you would think something was wrong with me. Besides, it's true. Aren't you supposed to be one of the biggest optimists we have?
Rand pointed out.
Sure I am.
Kat shrugged.
I'm also one of the dumbest. Doesn't mean I'm gonna miss that.
A thought seemed to strike her then, and she turned to look at Jean, frowning as if worried.
Is something wrong, Mademoiselle Kat?
He asked, blinking, as Nina brought up the rear out of the well.
For now, let's just keep this thing closed up,
Ryu said loudly, cutting that off.
Shame to waste those guys' hard work, but this thing clearly isn't going to be working anytime soon, so let's see about somebody making a lid for it with a lock on it, or something. It's not like we can't trust any of them, but that thing is dangerous, and we don't want them screwing with it and hurting themselves. They'll understand,
Nero assured him.
Like I said, son, they know our business is different from theirs. Good.
Ryu looked around to make sure nobody else was out in the street at the time to hear them, and lowered his voice.
On that note, let's keep what we know about the Church of Saint Eva under wraps for a while now. Eventually, we're going to have to own up and tell everybody in town we're taking action against them, and let them decide for themselves how they're going to react, but that's not now. We'll probably lose Kay, at least,
Bao said, frowning.
She's the most devout believer in Saint Eva. Shame.
Kay was the team's doctor, who they all saw regularly. White magic healed injuries, but there was only so much it could do for long-term, residual damage.
Let's hope not,
Ryu replied, but he couldn't quite keep the doubt out of his own voice.
Alright, then. Hey, you're back.
The door of the building next to theirs slammed open, and 3 scantily clad young women all stuck their heads out in a vertical row. One was tan, with bright red hair, and the other 2 pale, with blue and green, respectively. It was Sana, the first, who had seen them, and was now smirking slyly.
About time. We've been going crazy, sitting around here and waiting for you to get back. Especially Spoo and Solo. Are you alright?
Siso, the blue-haired one with the most gentle features, asked them, eyes on Jean. She was the most naive and innocent of the family, or at least acted that way. Ryu had his suspicions, considering how they had found her in the tower of the nymphomaniac witch Nimufo, but her relationship with Jean seemed to work.
When you told us all to remain behind when you went to India, I thought. Fortunately, the night is ours, mademoiselle,
Jean told her, smiling.
I will explain our recent circumstances to you over wine, dinner, and song, yes? As I am sure Monsieur Stan will to Mademoiselle Sana. Oh, how romantic,
Spoo said, her voice as dull and vague as her eyes.
Is anybody going to tell me in Solo? I'm afraid I'm busy tonight,
Nina murmured dryly.
Same here,
Ran said quickly, and most of the others muttered similar excuses.
What about you, sweetie?
Spoo asked Spar, slipping out from between her sisters and walking over.
You want to spend some time with me? My schedule remains open,
Spar replied calmly before anybody could warn it.
I see no reason not to engage in amicable conversation.
Spoo's eyes crossed.
What?
Psst,
sis.
Sana hissed.
He said yes. Well, now.
Spoo started to purr, then paused.
Wait. You're a he? How disappointing. Actually, Miss Sana is incorrect,
Spar explained.
As a grass man, I am neither male nor female. Oh,
Spoo said after a moment, in which everybody present could practically see her brain slowly working, while Sana put her hand to her face.
Really? Yes,
Spar replied patiently.
Really? I guess that works.
She smiled.
That's actually interesting. Men aren't my thing, but somebody who's neither. Are you as much of a prude about fusing as your friend is? If it wasn't for your interest, I might actually consider it,
Nina told her sharply.
Oh.
Spoo paused again.
Really? I have no reason not to,
Spar told her quickly, cutting that off.
Miss Sana tried it once with me, but the union was unsuccessful. Don't remind me,
Sana muttered.
Shame. You smell pretty good. She does, doesn't she?
Spoo agreed, green eyes fixed on Spar again.
Now I'm curious. Why don't we try that, then? As you wish.
Spar nodded politely, and the 2 of them started walking towards the sister's house.
However, I would prefer you refer to me as it, rather than she, as I am not female. You want us to call you in it?
Siso asked, frowning.
Isn't that kind of mean? It's accurate, is what it is,
Sten pointed out.
What'd be worse for you? Being called it or being called he? Man's got a point,
Sana agreed as they stepped out of the way, allowing Spar and Spoo to walk in.
Anybody started calling me a guy, I'd break his face for him, free of charge. You guys coming to watch?
The group exchanged a long look.
We probably should,
Bao said reluctantly, and they all began following the girls inside. The first room inside the sisters' house had been specially built in order to conduct the fusion rituals. The floor held 3 magical-looking circular designs in wrought metal set in the floor, the central one larger than the other 2. A mezzanine loomed above them, with twin staircases on either side, and massive torches flanking them. An old, bent woman with hawkish features wrapped in a brown robe was up there at the moment, looking over a book on a stand and muttering.
What are you all doing here?
She asked, looking up.
You aren't all gonna get fused tonight, are you? Probably just the usuals, but Spar and Spoo wanna try it first, giggly,
Nero hollered back, as several of the group flinched at her terminology.
Rest of us are just here in case something goes horribly wrong. Oh.
She calmed down slightly. For some reason, Nero was the only one who could control the old lady, a mystery from their youth that Ryu had no intention of ever learning the explanation behind.
Well, I guess I can't argue that one, considering these idiots. Love you too, Granny,
Sana snarked back.
Poor Spar has no idea what it's getting into,
Deez muttered under her breath as it and Spoo walked forward, Spar taking the center circle and Spoo the one to the left.
This family has issues, and that's coming from me. I know,
Nina murmured, looking worried.
I might end up having to fuse with her after all, just to keep her off of it. You realize that might be what her plan was all along, right?
Kat said quietly. Everybody thought about that for a moment, considering Spoo's mental abilities.
Doubtful.
Jean shook his head.
Looks like it's starting,
Bao said, and they all turned to look as Granny began chanting some gibberish, hands raised in the air. The room seemed to grow darker, and Spoo's entire body began to glow, before she transformed into a glittering sparkle of green light that circled the room before plunging into Spar's chest. As soon as she did, Spar began to glow as well, brighter and brighter, until it was nothing but a humanoid shape formed of blinding green light.
What the hell?
Sten blurted out.
That's never happened before. Complete transformation.
Siso whispered, awestruck.
Nobody's managed that since the days of Great Father Karn. Of who?
Ryu demanded, before turning his eyes back to the blur that Spar had become as its shape began to change. Slowly, the room returned to normal, and the light covering it faded, to reveal its new shape. The question of Spar's gender was now even more confused, as it was clearly female, a shapely, pale young girl in a purple and green dress of petals and leaves with a short skirt and no sleeves. Aside from that and her bizarre shoes, pink in front with purple, yellow spotted bulges over the heels, her only clothing was a similarly colored mushroom hat atop her long, vibrant pink hair.
Well,
Deez said after a long, silent moment.
That's different. Really?
Nina said quietly.
Oh.
Spar held out her hands before her, staring at them for a moment, before her eyes wandered further downward.
Oh, my. Oh, dear. This is...
She trailed off, vocabulary apparently exhausted.
Well. It's interesting, but I'd rather not. That is to say. Yeah, okay,
Granny agreed, producing a crystal ball and raising it above her head.
Don't think anybody needs this.
She began chanting again, and the room grew dark once more, as Spar began glowing again and the streak of light that was Spoo emerged from it. When the room returned to normal, both of them had as well, standing where they had been before.
I kind of liked it,
Spoo said, frowning.
Thank Loden,
Ryu growled, ignoring that.
Alright, now that that's over with, what did you mean about? Hey, what's going on out here?
A deep female voice yelled, cutting him off, as the door further into the house opened and the largest woman Ryu had ever seen emerged, straining to fit through. At least 7 feet both tall and wide, Solo was as tan as Sana with short, straight black hair, and dark eyes. The vacant look in them resembled Spoo's, the only thing she had in common with her sisters. She was as scantily clad as her sisters, wearing only a pleated grass skirt and a pair of coconut shells on a string in addition to a great deal of jewelry, which they also all shared.
Napping again, sis?
Sana asked her.
Figures. Spoo was trying a fusion with Spar here, but... well, it turned Spar into a girl. Don't think anybody except Spoo was too keen on that. Complete transformation.
Solo blinked.
Seriously? Nobody's done that since Great Father Karn's time. Has anybody else tried? Is anybody ever going to explain that to me?
Ryu rolled his eyes.
I tried it once, but the fusion failed,
Sana told her, ignoring him.
And I'm staying with Jean,
Siso said, blushing slightly as she put her arm around his waist, and he around hers.
Well then, guess it's up to me.
Solo walked forward, clapping a hand on Spar's shoulder as she passed by.
You're alright with that, aren't you, little guy? Further experimentation would be satisfactory,
Spar agreed, stumbling slightly.
That's the spirit.
Her broad lips twitched upward.
You're not really my type like the big guy over there, but something about you has me interested. Don't worry, I'll be gentle. Just don't get any ideas, sis,
Spoo commented as she walked out of the circle.
Spar's already agreed to spend tonight with me. Damnation.
Nina sighed.
It seems I am going to have to take one for the team. Oh, really?
Solo raised an eyebrow, apparently not hearing her.
My night's open too. Maybe we can share the little guy, hey. Looks like we're both going to have to.
Rand grimaced.
I'll have a little talk with her after we're done here,
Dees offered, eyes narrowed.
Like the one Cat had with Spoo. Make sure she understands fusion is all you're going to agree to.
Thanks, Rand said, looking away from her. Their mutual attraction was obvious to everybody in the town by now, but Dees flirted with anything male, and Rand was somewhat standoffish towards romance, which made the situation more than slightly awkward.
Alright, let's get started,
Giggly said, and she began chanting again. The fusion worked, just like it had before, and like before, Spar began to transform after the golden light that Solo transformed into merged with it. This time, however, when it was over, the grassman had become a huge pink vegetable bulb, around the same size an adult human, on a pair of feet covered in shoe-like red growths of root. Bao grunted after another long moment, as it stood there in silence.
Isn't that what grassmen look like as kids? It's their juvenile form, yes,
Dees said, nodding.
Okay, that's not going to work either. Nope,
Granny agreed, raising the crystal ball again.
That's a new one on me, too. Alright, out.
Again the fusion was inverted, and after a moment, Solo was back in her circle.
Anyways, were you saying something, kid? You know what?
Ryu shook his head.
I don't even care anymore. I'm going to go have some dinner.
He turned around and walked out the door without waiting to see if anybody would say anything more, and after a moment, most of the others followed him. Whenever they were in town, the group usually had dinner at the Rivob house, where Mrs. Rivob had added a restaurant onto their home. Her cooking was well worthy of it. Mrs. Haseko had similarly had her husband build a pub into theirs, which most of them tended to adjourn to afterwards for a few drinks before turning in. Tonight, Ryu did both before going up onto the roof of his own building. It was his favorite place for looking at the night sky while thinking over recent events.
Hey, Ryu.
A familiar voice came from the stairwell after he had been up there for a while, and he turned to see Sana walking up, somewhat hesitantly.
Sorry to bother you, but Sten said you would be up here. Haven't fused with him again yet?
Ryu asked.
I thought you would first thing. We're waiting until tomorrow morning.
She smiled, eyes glinting.
I'm going to go see him afterward, but I thought I should come talk to you first. And before you ask, no, he's not going to get the wrong idea about you and me being alone up here. I wasn't going to.
Ryu rolled his eyes.
Mostly because I think I've got more to worry about on that score than you. Nah, Kat and Nina both know that it's not gonna happen between us by now.
Sana tilted her hand back and forth, smirk still present.
A shame, but I'll deal. Now, if it was either of them up here alone with you, then the other one might start wondering. No offense, but you're the last person I want to discuss that with right now,
Ryu said bluntly.
Does everybody in this town know about that? Pretty much.
She shrugged.
But that's not what I came up here to talk with you about, anyways, so that's fine.
Her smile faded, and she walked over to sit on the edge of the roof next to him.
You were asking about Great Father Karn earlier, right? Yeah.
Ryu nodded.
He's your ancestor, right? From the Second Dragon War. One of my ancestors' companions.
Every 1,000 years, the world had been threatened by malevolent forces bent on its destruction, specifically, the evil goddess Miria, who had started both the First and Second Dragon Wars, plunging the world into chaos for her own twisted amusement. And each time, heroes chosen by Loden had risen to thwart her plans, led by a light dragon named Ryu, and a wing clan princess named Nina. The first victory against Miria had resulted in her imprisonment, and when that had failed a millennium later, the second had ended in her death.
One of the ones who slayed the goddess of lies,
Sana agreed.
Once the Second Dragon War was ended, he devoted himself to trying to preserve the Fusion clan. After the Dark Dragon Empire's Tiamat unit committed genocide against them, there were less than half a dozen left, and even if they all married humans, that's not enough to sustain a steady population. I guess Karn knew that. Eventually, the clansmen were all consolidated into one family line. The one that eventually resulted in me and my sisters and cousins. Wonder where the two of them are. How long, exactly, did Karn live?
Ryu asked slowly, deliberately avoiding thinking about two more of them moving in next door.
That's kind of the thing.
Sana stared out over the town below.
I asked Granny, and she said it was all right, so. The thing is, I don't know how or why, but. Great Father Karn didn't die. Ever. Everybody else in the family's always known him. When I was a kid, he had dropped by every few years to see us. I never really suspected anything until I grew up, and Granny told me he had done the same thing for her, and for my father, and for her grandmother, all the way back. He doesn't stop by much, now that we're adults, but every now and then. He was there, when you first tried fusing with me, wasn't he?
Ryu asked.
I remember somebody charging in. He knew who you were.
Sana nodded, chuckling weakly.
Boy, did we ever get chewed out that night. You believe me, then? Be pretty hypocritical of me not to, considering that from what Nina told me, my ancestors from the Second Dragon War are still around, too,
Ryu said after a moment's thought.
Both of them. And probably at least some of the others, pretty sure we've met Gobe. I don't know how it works any more than you do, but there we go. Ox and Mogu both died, I know that much.
Sana shrugged.
No idea about Bo, though. And then there's Deez. Deez is something of an exception to pretty much everything under the sun,
Ryu pointed out, and they both laughed.
Can't argue with that one,
Sana agreed, before sobering again.
You sure you want to be telling me about this? Not that we're untrustworthy or anything, but it sounds like that's the sort of thing you would want to keep in group. We are,
Ryu conceded.
But when you guys are fused to my guys, you're there for everything that goes on as much as we are. You already know about Loden, the Demon Lords, the conspiracy, and all the destiny bullshit. Might as well keep you up to date with everything else. I guess that makes sense.
Sana glanced at him.
Even if the practicality's a bit cold. Don't you ever just go with your emotions. When I can afford to,
Ryu said, smiling slightly.
Honestly, I prefer it that way, too. Problem is, doing that in the field is one thing, but when it comes to decisions of policy, well. Everybody on the team seems to have decided that I'm the leader. I'm not sure why, but if they want me to be, that means I have to be practical when it comes to anything that could affect them. Responsibility, and all that. You have to look out for them.
Sana nodded slowly.
Yeah, alright, I get that. I kind of feel that way about my family, too. Don't ever tell them this, but I'm kind of glad Granny decided to call us all back together recently, instead of just letting us scatter wherever we wanted. The rest always end up getting into trouble. Solo wasn't in any trouble when we found her,
Ryu pointed out.
Luck, probably.
She shrugged.
I guess what I'm saying is I understand what you're talking about. And I'm still glad you're trusting us with this. Even if it's practical.
She shook her head, looking slightly confused.
This is so weird. I've never really felt this way about a guy before, but... Do you think maybe we could be friends? Even if we're never gonna get together? I'd say it's worth a shot,
Ryu said, smiling again.
You're kind of in charge of your group, I'm in charge of mine, we live next door. Seems logical to me. Besides, you're okay, Sana. Gee, thanks,
she replied dryly.
You too, I guess.
They shared another laugh, before she abruptly grew serious again.
What's it like? Knowing that Loden's pushing you and your team to save the world? Being heroes. Honestly.
Ryu scowled.
It pisses me off. I think it does that to most of us. I hate the entire concept of anything like that controlling our lives in the first place, and then when you add the fact that historically, our predecessors all tended to end up getting fairly screwed over even when they won. Yeah. No. For a while, we were trying as hard as we could to just ignore it, until we figured out that wasn't going to work. These days, really, we just want to get it over with, get out, and get on with our lives.
He stared up at the moon, as a surge of white-hot wrath stirred within him.
That. And pay back against those bastards from Infinity. Something happened, didn't it?
Sana asked quietly.
In Windia. Something bad. Yeah,
Ryu admitted.
Something did. Sorry, but... Could you ask Sten about it? I'd really rather not talk about it. Alright,
Sana agreed, standing back up.
I should go see him before it gets any later, anyways. You two really get along well, don't you?
Ryu asked, raising an eyebrow. They'd been the first to successfully fuse, among other things.
We understand each other.
She shrugged, smirking again.
Don't get the wrong idea, it's not going to be permanent. I don't do that, and he's still got that hang-up with that princess from his homeland. But even after it's over with, we'll probably still be friends. You're actually the first guy friend I've had who wasn't one of my exes. Why am I not surprised by this?
Ryu rolled his eyes, but he was smiling again as well.
I just hope Spoo and Solo aren't keeping their hopes up for something like that themselves. Nina's not interested, and Rand's sort of got complications from another quarter. No comment.
Sana rolled her own eyes right back.
Figures Sisso's the one who gets the most stable relationship. Wonder if our ancestors ever had.
She cut off suddenly, face slowly taking on a contorted expression.
Oh. Oh Laden. What?
Ryu blinked.
I just realized,
she said, sounding horrified.
Deez was around for both Dragon Wars. What if she and my great father? You know. I deliberately avoid asking Deez anything even vaguely related to that sort of thing,
Ryu told her, wincing sympathetically.
Or thinking about it at all, really. Kind of like with your granny and Nero. You might want to do the same. Duly noted.
She shuddered.
Alright, I'm going to see Sten. You're still in the mood.
He teased her.
After that? Impressive. You're lucky we're friends now, or I'd say something really bitchy back to you for that one,
she retorted.
See you tomorrow, even if you won't be seeing me. Yeah.
He turned back to the stars as she left, and before long, went downstairs to his room on the second floor to get some sleep. Power. We still need more of your power. God still needs more of your power. Give your soul to God. Pray to God. Praise God. Give your heart and mind to God. You are becoming God's power. The next morning, as they had agreed, the group set off on the Great Bird's back once more, towards the west again. Sten and Jean had both fused with their respective girlfriends, resulting in a change in their natural coloration. Sten's fur was now a fiery red, and Jean's skin a light teal. Nobody commented on the fact that Rand's skin now had a slightly golden tint, and his shell a medium red, or that Nina's wings were a bright, vibrant pink. The Isle of Gunts was, like Evray, an island nation located in the South Ocean. Unlike Evray, it was much closer to sea level, with many beaches and docks for its extensive trade with other nations. Also unlike Evray, the island was far from a natural paradise, barren and rocky for the most part. Its few areas of healthy land barely produced enough food to keep the island's meager population alive even in the warm season. Fortunately, Gunts could more than afford to import more. In point of fact, they were one of the most wealthy nations in the world. This was due to the bovine builder clan and their natural talent for metalworking and technology, the breath of metal, which made even the untalented among their numbers a match for any professional of another clan. Their artisans commonly turned out work of breathtaking skill, on a level of functionality that could be fairly described as a century ahead of the rest of the world. Most of the greatest inventors of the past millennium had been builder clansmen, and any lost technology publicly discovered was brought to Gunts for analysis.
Didn't this place used to be a coastal nation?
Rand asked curiously as they landed near the capital city of Gant.
West of Highland? I'm pretty sure I heard about that once. Yes, many centuries ago,
Nina said as they all climbed off and the bird took off again.
Unfortunately, about half a millennium back, one of those earthquakes that keep altering the world's geography hit them, in a bad way. It was the greatest disaster of the modern age. All of Gunts except for the northernmost peninsula sank into the sea, leaving that as an island. 90% of the builder clan were killed. Even now, their population still hasn't fully recovered. There are far less of them than most other clans.
Most? Kat repeated, scowling.
I don't see anything they have to complain about.
For various reasons, the nomadic Warren clan barely numbered in the triple digits as far as anybody could tell.
Let's try not to talk about it while we're there, hey?
Ryu suggested as they walked through the massive steel city gates, nodding politely to the bored-looking guards as they went.
Something tells me it might be something of a sore subject. Just a hunch. A reasonable assumption, mon ami.
Jean nodded, looking serious.
Yeah.
Kat made a face as they walked down the streets, surrounded by gigantic, hulking builder clansmen with hoofed feet and sharp horns, the males coated in a full body coat of light brown fur. Like Kat's clan, the females seemed to lack the fur on their upper bodies, but their frames were still as huge as the males, though most of them weren't quite as muscularly developed.
This place just puts me on edge, is all. I feel like somebody's going to step on me any minute now.
She coughed, as the smog in the air became more apparent to Ryu.
You and me both,
Sten agreed.
This place is even worse than farmland. Oh, cut it out.
Rand rolled his eyes.
You don't see me complaining about feeling like I'm going to break anything I touch in the rest of the world, do you? To be fair, you rarely complain about anything unless it is sufficiently important,
Spar told him in a tone that almost actually held a slightly sardonic tone.
Whereas Sten and Kat are clearly the most vocal amongst our number. Honestly, I'd be more worried if an entire day went by without either of them finding some target for their ire. Yeah, listen to Spar,
Kat said, then paused.
Hey, wait a second here. I think this city has us all on edge,
Dees muttered, looking around her.
Even Spar. For obvious reasons, in its case.
Even inside the city gates, the land was ugly. Gant had been carved out of a mountainside, and its inhabitants had been more concerned with other things than aesthetic beauty. The houses were all massive, with pipes and smokestacks attached to the walls and roofs, every one of them with its workshop on the sides and boxes of parts stacked by the door. Even the cliffside itself had pipes running out of its surface in several places, with no explanation apparent.
To be fair, this place is just like this, from what I hear,
Bao commented, waving a hand in front of his face.
Even if they wanted to pretty it up, it probably wouldn't be a waste of time. So they focus on functionality instead. Makes sense. I'm aware.
Spar shook its head.
But this is my first time in a place without anything growing within 3 miles in any direction. It is unpleasant. Well, the sooner we get our business done, the sooner we can head back home,
Ryu told them.
So let's all.
He cut off, freezing, as they turned a corner and finally saw something that wasn't a monument to urban development. It was a different sort of monument entirely. A 30-foot bronze statue of a builder clansman stood in the center of town square, massive warhammer raised over one shoulder, a fierce grimace on his features. After a moment, they all slowly walked forward, staring at it.
Is that who I think it is? Ox,
Dees said quietly.
Yeah, it's him. They got him right, too. Whoever cast that knew what they were doing. It appears to have been his grandson,
Jean said solemnly, reading the plaque at the statue's base.
Ox, hero of the Second Dragon War and savior of our clan from dark dragon slavery, companion of Ryu and Nina, rests here. May his spirit always guide our hands. So.
Ryu slowly nodded.
He is gone. Him and Mogo,
Dees told him quietly, and they all turned to stare at her as she stared up at the statue. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, dark and almost venomous, a tone none of them had ever heard her use before, even on their enemies.
Oh, don't look so surprised. You all know about the others, or at least you have your suspicions. Yes, even you, Jean, so don't play dumber. Ox and Mogo were the most devoted to their families. They didn't want to outlive their own descendants. Karn and Gobet were more philosophical about it, though, and Bo.
She suddenly cut off.
Bo?
Nina asked quietly, after a long moment, putting a hand on her oldest friend's wrist.
Bo's an idiot,
she said eventually, voice dropping to a near whisper.
But those three are still around, and so are the last Ryu and the last Nina. Not that it means anything. They've deliberately avoided having any part in this mess except for what they have to, which is the smart way to do it, and they're going to keep it that way if I know them. So it doesn't really matter, when you get down to it. Not to us. Not to the demons. Not to Loudon. And not to the destiny bullshit. What about to you?
Spar asked, just as softly.
Ha.
She laughed once, sharp and bitter.
You learned how to joke. Didn't think you had it in you.
She turned away from the statue.
Enough. I'm not the kind of girl who sits around all day feeling sorry for herself, and we've got business to take care of. Let's go find his family. Their house'll probably be in the same place, and they'll know everything that's going on in this city, so they'll be able to tell us where to find the people we need. Will they be willing to help us?
Bao asked doubtfully, before wilting as she glanced at him. It wasn't even an angry look, just the opposite. It was dark and deep and filled with an obscure sort of pain that Ryu knew he'd never be able to understand.
If they're Ox's family,
she told him,
they'll help. That's something that doesn't change, even after 1,000 years.
They followed her through the streets in silence after that. Once more, their natural tendency towards trading snark was dampened by the mood. That had been happening more and more in the last month or so, but try as he might, Ryu couldn't think of anything to do about it. Some things, even Kat couldn't stay cheerful over. Before long, they found the house, a 2-story building that actually bore some traces of beauty. It was still an ugly brick edifice, but there was metalworking along the front in a fairly attractive design, including what looked like some sort of family crest.
This is the place, all right,
Dee said, knocking on the door.
Yeah, what is it?
A deep male voice yelled from inside. Without waiting for the answer, an elderly male builder clansman with a huge white beard slammed the door open.
I don't know who you are, but this had better be.
He trailed off as he saw Dee standing there, and his eyes darted to Ryu and Nina as well before he stood back. His voice was still just as loud and gruff when he spoke again, all the same.
Sorry, mistress. Didn't know it was you. Please, come inside. Elapsed turnaround time.
Bao muttered.
3.4 seconds,
Spar replied.
Come in, sit down,
the builder clansman told them as they walked past boxes of tools and parts, sinks of water, glass furnaces and workbenches with many moving parts. The bottom floor of the house was one big room mostly filled with such things, though there were a few bookshelves against one wall and what looked like a kitchen corner. Crossing to that, he began taking out mugs.
I've got a new batch of ale that's just finished brewing. You've got good timing. Well, we won't say no.
Ryu shrugged, then glanced at Nina, who shook her head.
Well, most of us won't. Not much for good brown ale, missy.
The builder clansman asked her keenly.
Shame. Your ancestor always liked having a pint with the rest of them, from the way I heard it. She did, but she really preferred wine,
Dees explained.
She just wanted to fit in. Be one of the guys, you know. I never really understood that line of thought, myself.
Kat grinned, cheered by the prospect of a drink.
I just like the stuff. I suppose I could try some, considering I'm sure it's of the highest quality,
Nina murmured, prompting Jean and Spar to exchange a dubious glance before both of them nodded as well.
That's the spirit.
The old man grinned, filling 10 mugs and carrying them over on a tray that looked to have been a shield before it was flattened out.
Try something new, hey? You're her descendant, all right.
As everybody took their ale, some more enthusiastically than others, he took a swig from his own mug before looking at them again.
So, it's that time again, is it? Looks like you've got your whole team assembled. What's going on, anyways? Pretty sure I would have noticed if the world was falling apart again. They're being more subtle about it, this time.
Ryu said after a moment. He hated even acting like he was nothing more than the latest hero. But it would keep their explanation simple.
We've been uncovering agents of Infinity for most of the year, some of them in very dangerous positions. Infiltration, hey.
The old man narrowed his eyes.
Yeah, that's different, but I can see it coming. I don't really want to know just where you're talking about, do I? Might be best for all of us.
Sten nodded.
Glad to see you know what you're doing. Just common sense, is all.
The old man shrugged, trying to look casual, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before.
Mind if I ask if there's any chance it'll affect guns, though? Not as long as we win,
Ryu said honestly.
As far as we know, they're ignoring your clan this time around, which I think everybody would agree you deserve after the Dragon Wars. We're not anticipating anything quite as spectacular as the finale of either of those, either. Both because of the whole subtlety thing, and because Mary is still dead. Seems like her old crew have picked up her torch by themselves. Wish I could say I was surprised by that.
The old man took another drink.
All right, that's good enough for me. I ain't normally too keen on doing favors for total strangers, but I guess I kind of have a vested interest in making sure the world sticks around. Besides, if I didn't help you guys, my old great father would probably rise from the grave and kick my ass up between my horns. What can I do for you? 2 things we need information on,
Ryu told him, drinking more as well.
First, there's a group of freelancers that we heard run their operations from somewhere on the island. The Renegades. Any idea where their home base is, so we can contact them? The Renegades.
The old man blinked.
Tigali's crew. That's them,
Bao said, grinning.
You know where they are. Yeah, but it ain't here,
he replied.
A couple months back, they packed up and moved out. Said they were getting involved in something so big that if it went wrong, it could affect everybody around them, so they were going to set up shop somewhere there wasn't anybody else around to risk. Over in southern Carmen, in some canyon called Cotland. That's the place my mother told us about.
Rand's eyes widened.
Yeah, but we already tried to find it, and we couldn't.
Kat scowled.
Not a good sign. Hold on a second.
Standing up, the old man went over to one of his bookshelves and pulled out an atlas. Bringing it back to them, he opened it up to a map of Carmen and pointed.
Right there. It's just a little crack in the cliffside at first, but it widens up inside, from what I hear. I will remember that location,
Spar said calmly.
All right.
Ryu smiled. It was still something, so the trip hadn't been an entire waste of time on that score.
The other thing we need is somebody who's an expert, or at least has an interest, in lost technology. We've found some buried back in our town, and we need some questions answered about it. Lost technology?
The old man blinked.
Really? Guess I shouldn't be surprised, but... Well, that much, I can help you with.
Turning his head around, he bellowed towards the back of the lab.
Aikachi, get up here. Aikachi?
Jean asked politely.
My granddaughter,
the old man harumphed.
Brilliant, but a total ditz. She's old enough to move out and get her own home by now, but she's too busy spending all day in her workshop to even get started on that. Yes, grandfather.
A steel hatch on the floor popped open, and a pretty young girl climbed out from a ladder. 8 feet tall, she was pale and curvy, with a bust that was even larger than Dee's. She wore a tight white dress with a short skirt, her legs were covered with fur the same fiery orange color as her short hair, and her horns and hooves were small and cute.
Oh. You have guests? I'm sorry, I was so busy down in the workshop, I didn't hear. That's all right,
Ryu told her, deliberately maintaining eye contact.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Ryu Battison, and me and my team have a problem your grandfather told us you can help us with. Oh, a customer.
She clapped her hands together excitedly, and several of the group winced.
I'm sorry, I should have come up as soon as you arrived, but I just had so many things I was working on, like my blueprints for a flying machine. What?
Nina choked.
Don't bother getting worked up.
The old man rolled his eyes.
It's her 17th model, and none of the others have stayed in the air for longer than 5 seconds. Yes, but I'm on the right track with this latest design, I just know it.
Aikachi continued, oblivious to the criticism.
And then there's the idea for the oxygen storage device, and the accelerated coffee engine, and the automatic.
She blushed suddenly, pausing for a moment before continuing to chatter.
Anyways, I'm sorry I'm going on so much, but engineering is just so much fun, I can't help myself. The cold, shining metal, the sound of gears, the smell of oil. Oh, forgive me. I just get so excited by machinery. What was it you wanted me for again? Your grandfather tells us you're an expert on lost technology,
Ryu started to explain, only to be cut off as her eyes widened and she started talking again.
Yes, I love lost technology. It's so fascinating, how advanced it is, and how it all existed thousands of years ago, but we don't have any of it anymore. Even now, when we're starting to grow technologically advanced again, lost technology is completely different from anything everybody's managed to create, both in form and in function. Half the fun with it is just examining how it was all made, the design ideal behind it, before you even get to how it works. I could spend all day working with lost technology. All day.
Her grandfather snorted, though his eyes were affectionate.
Try all month, the last time, when that guy brought in that blendy bladdy thingy. I had to remind you to eat. Remember when I had to remind you to eat? Yes, I know.
Aikachi looked slightly embarrassed, but continued to ramble on.
Which was ironic, considering it turned out to be an electrically powered food processor. But I promise, that won't happen again. Oh no, I'm still babbling. Anyways, where is it? I won't even charge you for it. Just figuring out what it does will be payment enough. Sure it will.
The old man gave Ryu a look.
Actually, we couldn't exactly bring it with us,
Ryu told her, ignoring that for the moment.
See, what we found is kind of this gigantic mess of pipes connected to the device, at the bottom of an old well we opened back up in our town. We know some about what it does, but we'd kind of like to know how it works, and just how much of the town it goes under. Do you think you could take a look, and see what you can?
He trailed off, Ichiki's eyes were even wider than before, and he could practically see sparkles in them.
A device under your town.
She squealed, clapping her hands together and hopping, forcing most of the men to look away.
Are you serious? I've never even seen anything like that before. How big are we talking here? Un moment, mademoiselle,
Jean said, picking up a sketchpad that was lying on the table next to a pencil. After a few moments with it, he handed it to her. Glancing at it as he did, Ryu saw that it was a surprisingly detailed sketch of the device, with measurements.
My memory is, of course, not accurate down to the inch, but that is a fair approximation. Oh. Oh, wow,
Aikachi murmured, staring at the sketch.
And you'll let me examine it? Please, say yes. That's what we're here for,
Ryu reminded her.
Like I said, we already know something about what it does, and it's not pleasant, but... No, that's all right.
Aikachi said quickly, putting the sketchpad back down.
I'd really prefer it if I discovered its functions by myself, without any knowledge that might affect my analysis before the fact. I'll get my... Oh, wait. Where did you say this town of yours was again? I'll need to know that if I'm going to go there. Southern Oria,
Ryu said, somehow managing to avoid commenting on the fact that she had almost forgotten to ask.
West of Mount Fubi. There's a beach near it. Alright, I'll arrange for travel just as soon as I get everything I need packed.
Aikachi promised, before turning around and bolting for the hatch.
Tools. I need tools. And sketchpads, and books, and notes, and all my other lost technology, and...
Her voice trailed off as she slammed the hatch behind her.
Southern Oria, hey,
the old man said, raising an eyebrow.
Heard some things about a town down there. Some new one that's starting up? Band of mercs started it up, and now the ruins are being rebuilt. Yeah, that's us.
Ryu nodded.
Good things, I hope. Mostly.
The old man chuckled.
Heard that old maniac Niromani somehow managed to get on your crew, for one thing, and that he's running the show most of the time in that town of yours. Is that codger really still alive? Oh, you know Nero.
Ryu grinned, relaxing.
Yeah, he's our agent, and he's doing fine. Well, fine for him, anyways. Probably gonna wind up being mayor or something once we really get the place off the ground. Well, any friend of Nero's a friend of mine,
the old man told them, though a glint had come into his eyes.
Heard something else, too. Something about giving houses in town to people who want to move in, as long as they've got useful talents. We do still have a couple empty houses that need to be filled,
Ryu admitted, smiling slightly.
And you've been wanting your granddaughter to move out, haven't you? Knew you were a sharp one, kid,
the old man said, standing up.
I'll go tell her to start packing all her stuff, not just what she thinks she'll need for this job, then.
He paused as he started to turn towards the hatch.
Think there's anybody in town who you can ask to keep an eye on her? Make sure she really does remember to eat, things like that. She's a genius, but she's a scatterbrain, especially when something gets her attention like this. We'll ask Mrs. Rivob to check up on her regularly,
Bao promised, though he was frowning slightly.
Not that I'm complaining, but... You're being awfully trusting, letting your daughter move out to a town run by freelance adventurers. If it was anybody else, I wouldn't even consider it,
the old man admitted, looking back at Ryu, Nina, and Deez, one at a time.
But you're their descendants, and you're you, Miss Deez. If I can't trust you guys, I can't trust anybody, the way I see it. I'm sure those old rats, the Sammy brothers, would feel the same way if you had knocked on their door instead of mine. Not that that's too likely, seeing as how you would have to find them first. Who?
Ryu asked, then paused as the answer dawned on him.
Mogos.
Deez asked quietly.
Yep.
The old man nodded.
We keep in touch. Me and Aikachi are probably the only ones who aren't involved in your business that know the mole clan's still out there. Don't go spreading it around, though, hey? They disappeared for a reason. We'll keep it under wraps,
Ryu promised.
We know how to keep our mouths shut about classified information like that. Yeah, I believe it.
He looked at Ryu oddly, as if he was going to say something else, but then shook his head.
Anyways, thanks for giving my granddaughter a reason to move out. She kind of needed one. No problem.
Ryu nodded, as they all stood up.
We'll get out of your hair, then. I'll tell the guys back in town to get the house closest to the well ready for her, pretty sure that one's still empty. Probably for the best, so she doesn't get lost.
The old man chuckled.
I'll make sure she's packed up by the end of the day, so she should be there in a couple more weeks. Good luck with saving the world. Thanks.
Ryu shook his hand, turned and left, the others following behind him.
You handled that pretty well,
Deez told him as they walked back towards the city gates.
You're really getting the hang of this whole leadership thing, aren't you? I was gonna say,
Bao agreed.
You've come a long way from back when you were screwing up our meetings with Elder Allen, buddy. I'm proud of you. Thanks,
Ryu replied dryly.
I think. I was wondering more about the new party line,
Sten commented.
We're not even trying to hide it anymore, then? That we're gonna be big dem heroes and save the world. Is there any reason to?
Ryu glanced over his shoulder at them all, as they approached the statue of Ox again.
Something I'm starting to figure out about the last crew. D's, correct me if I'm wrong. But the way I think it was, they didn't actually consider themselves heroes, any more than we do. Half of them wanted payback for what the Dark Dragon Empire did to their homelands, plain and simple, and the other half were just in it for the excitement of taking them on. That, and watching each other's backs, were what it really came down to for motivation.
Pretty much, D's agreed.
All the glitz and glory came after the fact, and they just went along with that because they'd pretty much stopped caring by then. When it was actually going on, they didn't give a crap about destiny. That was the impression I got as well,
Nina said quietly.
But we are going to do it, right? We're going to save the world. Yeah.
Ryu nodded.
We are. What I'm saying is, if that's what it takes to be heroes, there's no reason mugs like us can't do that. So yeah, that's what we're going with now. Might not want to talk ourselves up that way around the renegades, don't want to seem like we're blowing our own horns, you know, but with anybody who expects that from us? Let's just roll with it, from now on. It is, at this point, simple honesty,
Spar noted.
It is highly likely that invoking our destined roles will be necessary to accomplish our own goals, and so we will do so. The distinction that said destiny is not the goal itself should not necessarily be clarified. Hey?
Kat asked, before shaking her head.
Actually, don't bother. I won't get it anyway, and I don't really need to. Don't really know how I feel about being some big shot hero, either I am a simple kind of girl, you know, but if that's what it takes, I can play it that way. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Bao nodded.
I'm with you. And with you, buddy. As always, I believe you all sell yourselves far too short, mon amis,
Jean said, voice serious despite his smile.
But then again, that is not the point here, now is it? I trust that, in my case, I do not even have to say it. No, you really don't.
Sten nodded, eyes serious.
Pretty good, picking up on that, too. You're learning, Jean. Alright, I'm in. As am I,
Spar agreed.
For the world. You know where I stand on this,
Ren said firmly.
Even after we get my mother back, as long as one of those assholes is walking, I'm not gonna be done. I'm not a fan of violence, as a general rule, but this is different. This is personal,
Nina murmured, eyes on the sky.
Yeah.
Ryu nodded.
It is. We're all on the same page, then. Seems that way,
Deez agreed, voice solemn.
Hope it doesn't creep anybody out too much if I'm glad to see it. That you're handling it this well. I figured you would, but it's nice to see that I was right. Don't you mean we?
Rand asked her, and she shot him a brief smile.
Something like that.
Before anybody else could ask her just what she meant by that, she kept talking.
I'm on board, though. Don't ever doubt that. All the way, to the ends of the earth. That's one thing we never doubted,
Bao told her seriously, and Kat nodded.
Any of us. Even if we doubted everything else, and that's in the past, too. Good.
Ryu glanced into an alley at an old statue of Laden for a moment, then turned his gaze away.
Alright, it's getting late. Let's find an inn and get some rooms. Tomorrow, we'll head west, and give finding this canyon another try. And then?
Kat asked him.
And then, with luck, we work on our hero act,
Ryu told her, smiling slightly.
Let's hope we pick it up quick.
Cheer up son, I know a place where mugs like us belong.